Welcome to Echo Trade, where we bring on professional investment advisors to simplify complex financial topics for you. Today, we're talking about a decision every investor has to make, and that's choosing between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. So we're going to bring on John Wells from Morrison Wells to go over this. He has kind of his own personal approach on kind of making this decision based off of a couple different factors, your financial situation, your income, and things like that, and your age. So we're going to get some insights from John. So let's dive in. Hey, John, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Hey, Jeff. Happy New Year. It's good to see you. I love the new Echo Trade hat.
Yeah, you got to keep the brand going, right? So, but I appreciate you taking some time. So we're talking about traditional IRAs versus a Roth IRA, and no relation here with Jeff Roth. But I'm curious to I want to go into a lot on this, but first off, for people who don't know, can you kind of just give us the basic overview of what's the differences between the two?
Sure. The basics are they're both retirement accounts or for money in retirement. And with the traditional Roth IRA, the money that goes in there goes in before you're taxed on it. And then it can grow tax-free. And when you pull it out, you are taxed at whatever the marginal tax rate on that money happens to be for you at that point in time when you withdraw it. With a Roth IRA, you put in after-tax dollars, and then you're never taxed on it again. It gets to grow tax-free, and you're not taxed on it. Also, with a Roth IRA, there's no required minimum distribution once you turn 73. That age is actually going up to 74 next year, I believe. But with a traditional IRA, you have to start taking, the federal government makes you start taking money out of that once you reach the required minimum distribution age.
Got it. So it's basically the biggest part is the tax implications, right? And it's whether you're going to, have that tax now or defer that to later.
That's right.
And so
That's right.
I think you really want to get into that in terms of kind of making that decision. But I'm curious also, just you mentioned kind of the withdrawal requirements depending on which IRA you're going with. Are there any other kind of rules and regulations that go along with in terms of, you talked about the distributions, but also in terms of how much I can actually invest on an annual basis?
The dollar amounts that you're allowed to invest in each account type are the same on an annual basis. And once you turn 50 years old, there's a catch up. So currently it's $7,000 per year per individual. And there's a $1,000 a year catch up starting this year, 2024, for people 50 years and older. So those are the main limitations there. Also, with a Roth IRA, there is a income limitation. So up to $228,000 of income. If you earn more than that as married filing jointly, you are prohibited actually from contributing to a Roth IRA. And before that, there's a little bit of a graduated scale as you approach $228,000 in income. But really, you have to be below that level to contribute to a Roth.
Got it. So that's obviously limiting no matter who can actually, utilize a Roth IRA in the first place. Is there anything in terms of early withdrawals and any kind of penalties?
Yeah, for both the early withdrawal penalty, you have to be 59 and a half before you start withdrawing. If you withdraw it before that, there's I believe a 10% penalty on the dollar amount you withdraw, as well as there's a catch up for any capital gains paid. So there's almost dual penalties for early withdrawals. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about within a retirement plan, an employer retirement plan, there are cases where you can borrow against it and that sort of thing. But those withdrawal penalties that I mentioned exist.
And so, is that for both? Is it the same across the Roth and the traditional IRA?
I believe it is. Yes, I believe it is. Yep.
Yeah. And so, okay, now let's kind of go into how do we go about making this decision on which one to invest with, right? And so We talked a little bit about this last week, and it seems like you're getting a lot of questions from your clients, about this recently, which is why I thought it was a great topic for us to kind of cover right now. But so how do you kind of, with your clients and with anybody else, how would I go about thinking about, should I defer those tax payments or should I take them now? Should I invest in a Roth or traditional IRA?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, generally speaking, most financial advisors are going to suggest looking to put in a Roth, a Roth format, uh, a lot of one's assets. And we came upon a competitive situation recently between us and another advisor, and getting feedback from the prospective client. The other advisor spent pretty much all of their meeting talking about the benefits of Rothing, and we talked about different things, our investment philosophy, how we work with clients, and that sort of thing. And the reason why we don't focus as much attention on this decision, and this isn't going to be an easy answer for echo traders. It's really, we believe that it's a very individualized decision whether you want to start with Roth, start with regular, or do some form of conversion. Let me give you two examples to illustrate that this is a very specific to the individual and the family. So think about two people in their 70s who a decade ago decided to do a Roth conversion of their 401k plan at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So similar mechanism as a traditional IRA, just in a 401k wrapper. That those people would have experienced the Trump tax cuts, so tax brackets and tax rates. Well, tax brackets moved up in income and tax rates moved down. And during that time, they would have been forced to take required minimum distributions. But let's say they're still at a high income level. Those people actually lost money by doing Roth conversions because tax rates went down
Mm-hmm.
during that time. So tax rate. So the idea of putting money in a Roth or converting to a Roth, it is an explicit bet on where you think tax rates are going. So if tax rates are higher in the future and you decide to do a Roth conversion today, then the chances are it's probably going to work as a financial decision for you and on a numbers basis. If tax rates are lower in the future, then it's likely that the decision to convert was a poor one. But it's more complicated than that, because think about the individual who they chose to convert. Tax rates went up, but their income in retirement is by choice half of what it was during their peak retirement years. So even though rates went up, their individualized marginal tax rate is still lower in the future than it was today. So if they did a Roth conversion today, they're losing out because they're paying a higher tax rate today than they will on future income, even though statutory tax rates rose. So it's a very complicated question, and somebody making that decision, has to have a good sense of tax rates going up, of where their personal tax bracket could be, but kind of more knowable than that is where their income might be. What level of income are they going to have to draw in during retirement to cover their expenses, and maybe they can get a good sense of what they should do for their family. But even in that situation, there is the possibility, unlikely, admittedly unlikely, but there is the possibility that rates actually go down in the future, and then you wouldn't do the Roth conversion. So one other, like, totally different case, just to illustrate how it's different for everyone. A 22-year-old who's just started working, they're in a low income tax bracket today, assuming that they can still cover their monthly expenses. That's a case where we would suggest contributing to a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, if they can afford it on the expense side, because they are paying that extra tax today. But tax rates low, income low, then that makes a lot of sense. We just, as a firm, don't believe that there is a single answer for an age range of people, or an income demographic of people. I think it's much more client and person and family specific than that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, again, it is exactly what you said. It's very specific to the individual. But I guess if you want to generalize, like you mentioned, if you're in your 20s, low income, low tax bracket, then it would might maybe lean towards, depending on other circumstances, kind of going with the traditional IRA. So
I think that's fair.
yeah, and versus hey, okay, now I'm actually in my prime earning years. Again, maybe there's other factors that change this decision, but then you look at hey, I'm in a high income, high tax bracket, and then maybe I defer those taxes at that point.
And then another thing here, Jeff. Again, it's an example where tax rate. It's very specific to your view on taxes in the future. But think about the family who currently is above the estate tax threshold, meaning if they passed away today, anything above that estate tax threshold would be taxed at 40%. In that situation, if they've worked with an estate attorney and they've exhausted all of the possibilities to kind of reduce, to escape that estate tax. One consideration, if they had significant money in a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k, would be to do a Roth conversion. And so they're locking in right today. The highest marginal federal rate is 37%. So they're locking in 30%, 37%, instead of their heirs paying 40%. And then there's no required minimum distribution going forward, for the heirs. So I know 3 percentage points doesn't necessarily sound like that big of a deal, but it is a consideration in Roth conversions. And also, you don't know where the estate tax is going either, right? If the estate tax dollar cap comes down and the rate goes up, then that conversion process might even look more attractive. One other point on this whole thing that I would like to make, because it is pretty nebulous and it is pretty persons and family specific, is just don't forget that the tax rates are mathematically transitive, meaning that if you are taxed on 20% on $100 today, and then that money grows at 10% a year for 5 years, that's going to give you the same dollar value as if you had $100 that grew at 10% a year for 5 years, and then was taxed on 80%. So when we're talking Roth versus traditional, regardless of what anyone else says, it is absolutely a bet on the direction and the change of future tax rates.
Got it. So and you've reiterated this several times. Obviously, ideally, you'd work with somebody like yourself to get that personalized advice dependent on each person's situation. But for the people that can't get access to that for whatever reason, they don't have the funds to kind of meet minimum capital requirements that could be required. What can you kind of break it down into a couple different things, that at least the factors that people should think about and consider when making this decision?
Yeah, definitely. Look at the tax brackets of the day. Look at one's personal income. See where they're kind of falling in there. Honestly assess what the trajectory of well, going that way. Honestly assess the trajectory of one's career and potential earnings in the future. And in most cases, early stage in a career, lower income, lower rates. I mean, the decision to go Roth is gonna likely make sense. I think it becomes far less clear cut as you get older, as your income increases, and you see the potential for your income to increase on a year over year basis. But generally speaking, that demographic that I mentioned first, I think it likely makes a lot of sense to Roth.
Perfect. John, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the insight. I'm sure investors are going to get a lot of use out of it. And if you don't want to make the decisions yourself, you can talk to somebody like John, or you can go to Echo Trade and basically just copy their portfolio on Echo Trade. Copy the smart kids. That's what I like to do in class. Got me through it. So I appreciate the time, John. Hope you have a happy new year.
That's right. Thanks, Jeff. Happy New Year. Great to be here as usual.